Welcome back! I'm Corinne Phillips and this is Fresh Pea Cooks. Today I'm so excited to share a recipe with you for the most delicious, flaky, buttery pastry crust that's gluten-free. The interesting thing about this crust is it uses traditional pastry methods. The traditional French method of making laminated dough is what is going to give this pie crust those beautiful layers and those tender flakes. There are a few things you need to remember when you're making pastry, or in our case pie. Cold, cold, cold is your friend. Your water should be cold, your flour should be cold, your butter should be super cold. And for those of you that don't use dairy or don't eat dairy, you can make this with Smart Balance, and I've also made it successfully with frozen coconut oil, which solidifies at cold temperatures. So those are your two other options. Today I'm going to be making this with butter. For this recipe, I have my gluten-free flour mixture, 300 grams, and I'll put the full recipe below this video so you don't have to remember or write stuff down. Then I have a fairly decent sized pinch of baking powder, half a teaspoon salt, and sugar and apple cider vinegar. I'm going to measure out my ice water in here as soon as we're ready to go. But for right now, I want to explain what's going on because this will come together in two parts. The first part is mixing half of the butter with the flour in a food processor. The second stage is the important part. We're going to take the other half of our butter in our big chunks. We're going to take our ice water and our vinegar, and we're going to just drizzle it into our food processor until clumps start to form, and that's literally maybe 3 or 4 or 5 seconds at the very most. The big pieces of butter are going to remain in there. That's what we want. At that point, we're going to stop our food processor, gather everything into a ball, and we're going to pat it into a disc, cover it in saran or a plastic baggie, and put it in the fridge for a minimum of 1 hour. It can be up to a day. That is going to cool our dough down and make it a lot easier to roll out. For those of you interested in baking and interested in baking very well, I really strongly encourage you to get a scale. There's a couple different ways that we measure flour in baking. One is the scoop and sweep. It's taking a measuring cup, scooping it into our flour, and sweeping the excess off. That produces significantly up to 25% more flour than the spoon and sweep, which is taking a spoon, filling up our cup, and then sweeping it off. So a scale eliminates all of that. Highly recommend it. This little guy, this is my favorite cheap scale. It's a Scali. I think you can get them for around $20 or $30. And it has a tare, it has grams, it has ounces in decimal. It's really great. It's a lot better than some of the scales out there where if you get something syrupy or sweet or sticky around the buttons, then they'll cease to function as buttons, which I've had before. So that's a great one. Okay, so our mise is in place here. Everything's ready to go. I'm going to take my dry ingredients and add them to the flour mixture. We're going to put this in our food processor. I'm going to go ahead and measure out a half a cup of ice water. And I'm going to add my vinegar. So here's where technique becomes key. We're going to take our really cold butter, and this butter was frozen when I cut it up, and just in rough chunks. So I put it in the refrigerator, so it's a really cold, like colder than refrigerator butter. And we're going to blend this just until all of those pieces are broken up. Okay, so when I feel in here, I don't feel any chunks of butter. What this is doing is it's hydrating all of that flour with our fat. So this is the critical part. I'm going to add this icy vinegar water and this really cold butter, and I'm going to just pulse it for a few seconds until that water is evenly distributed. Not until it clumps up. We're not going to go nearly that far, just until it starts to come together, and I'm just going to watch through the feed tube. That's it, maybe 5 seconds. So here's what we're looking at. There's a piece of butter in here that's huge. This one didn't get broken up at all. That's okay. So I'm gonna take our dough out and form it into a ball. Now you want to do this fairly quickly. We want to keep this cold, but we are going to chill it again. So it's not a huge big deal, just like don't take a phone call or something when you're making this. It's fairly sticky. It's going to behave. It's a little different than wheat flour. So here's our dough ball. I generally edit out my hand washing. For a cook, I have this really crazy phobia of stuff on my hands. It makes me freak out. So just making this dough, I've washed them 4 times. I just can't stand it. I should do a compilation video of just hand washing, and you could see the whole madness of it. Now when you're making pastry, you want to use plenty of flour on your surface. You don't want your dough sticking. And I like to have like a little reservoir over there that I can just pull from when I need it. So this dough, you'll see, maybe you can see it in this camera. It has these beautiful pockets of butter in it that weren't distributed. So see all these light, pockety, buttery chunks? That's exactly what you want. This one's really tough. It's really hard. It's been in the fridge overnight. So you might want to let it sit for like 5 minutes or so just to come up to temp a little bit. See if we can't get it started. All right, our dough is about 1/8 of an inch thick. So I'm just going to fold it over on top of itself. And again, this is when a bench scraper comes in really handy. You can kind of just even up those edges. This is the final folding over, and you'll notice that your dough has already become a lot tougher. Now because I want this fairly round, I'm just going to fold these corners under because I want the front and the top of the dough to look seamless. I don't want these little splits in it. So you can see these layers. These are going to translate into layers in your finished crust. Thanksgiving is my favorite holiday because it's not so much centered around stuff, but rather on being. And being together with friends and family around a table with really good food is kind of a perfect day for me. So I really enjoy the holiday. And our family, traditionally, we've had a very traditional Northwestern Thanksgiving meal. And I've taken nearly all of those recipes and recreated them and made them into something that I personally enjoy. So if you have a favorite Thanksgiving meal that you'd like to see recreated on Fresh Pea Cooks, leave me a comment below and tell me about your tradition. Tell me about the dish. And I probably have time to get to one or two of them before the holidays. So thank you. I'd love to share some of my favorite holiday recipes with you. Just let me know what you'd like to see. Thanks for being here, and I will see you guys next time.